So good evening, everybody, once again. This is CSME. And like I said, CSME is divided into 4 parts. So we have strategic management, we have governance, we have ethics, and as well we have what we call the risk management. Now, if you are familiar with ICANN question, you will see that I can always test these 4 parts in all diets. If you go back to their question, the way they set it, you see that they always set this question. They always set it. So what you have to do is to make sure that you are familiar yourself with the whole parts, so that anywhere the question is coming from, you'll be able to pick conveniently. So strategic aspect is 30 marks or 30%, while the governance is 20%. This risk we are talking about is also 20%, and ethics is also 20% as it is. So let's get started. So everything we want to do today is going to be in a summary of what we want to do today. I'm going to define risk to you. I'm going to tell you types of risk. I'm going to tell you ways to control risk. We are going to look at the way to monitor risk. And we are also going to look at the risk management according to iOS 31,000. So we are going to look at all this as we without wasting our time. Like I said, let me share my screen on my material we are going to discuss with. So I want to believe you can all see my screen. So this is what we call risk management. So I will need to increase the font a bit so that everybody will see that. Okay, so this is what we are going to discuss within short period we have. Now, for every organization or for every business you want to go into, there's always a level of risk attached to it. So you can't run away from risk. You can only try to reduce the risk. There's no how you will totally avoid risk. And by the time we start going on now, you will understand the aspects in which I'm coming from. So let's take it one by one. Let's start with the risk itself. Risk is usually associated with the possibility that things might go wrong, that events might turn out worse than what's expected, or that something bad might happen. You may be thinking that I'm going to pass my ICANN or the otherwise. In that 2 aspects, there's a risk attached to it. And that is why you see so many people will not, some people will not take that step, will not be bold enough to say, see, I'm starting my ICANN, especially if they have been hearing about some people fail or this thing happens and the like. But for them not to take that risk, they will remain there. you just have to take the risk. Either it's going to be positive, maybe something bad is going to happen, or the worst aspect of it. Now, this risk can be divided into two. We have pure risk. Another name for that pure risk is what we call downside risk. I believe my screen is wide enough to see. So now this pure risk is actually talking about don't bother about yourself. Either there's going to be probability of getting positive answer. It means the results, the outcome is definitely going to be negative. That is what we call pure risk. So when you say the risk is pure risk, it means it's a risk where there is a possibility that adverse events will occur. Okay? There's no opinion. There's no what am I going to say? There's no hope that there's going to be positive outcome. Okay, why? There's another one we call speculative risk. This speculative risk is two-way risk. So it can either be positive outcome or negative outcome. So it's like 50-50. So if I write I can, it's either I pass or I fail. That is speculative risk. Why pure risk is that there's no how the person is going to do it. The result is going to be what? Is going to be negative. That is what we call downside risk. I believe that one is clear. So I'm just trying to introduce you to risk. Risk is actually divided into two. It's just two chapters. The first one is the risk management, which we are talking about now. Then we move on to risk control. Okay, and from there we'll be fine to go when we are done. So let's continue to move on. Now, the nature of risk management is the process of managing both down risk and business risk. It can be defined as the culture, structures, and processes that are focused on achieving possible opportunity, yet at the same time control unwanted results. There's no how you want to run away from risk, especially as a businessman. You can't say because I don't want to get involved, I don't want to experience risk, I don't want to get negative results, so you stop doing business or you stop going into business or something. No, you must find a way how you can manage that risk and how you can control the risk. So it's either pure risk or speculative risk. No matter the risk, you just have to find a way of controlling it. Even the higher the risk, the higher the return. That is what everybody knows. So as long as you are running away from the risk, it means your chances of being or the chances of having higher revenue is very slim. Because the more you take the risk, the more the revenue will come. If it's eventually turned to what? Turned to positive. Okay. Now, responsibility for risk management. Risk management is a corporate governance issue. The board of directors have a responsibility to safeguard the assets of the company and to protect the investments of shareholders from loss of what? Of value. The board should therefore keep strategic risk within limits that shareholder will expect and to avoid uncontrolled operational risk. The International Corporate Governance Network, which is ICGN, risk oversight guideline. So we're going to look at the guideline very soon. But what this one is saying is that it is the responsibility of the management to make sure that they control the risk. Now, we just mentioned that the higher the risk, the higher the return. That does not mean that they should just run into business or into contract that is having the high risk, that the return they are going to have is going to be definitely pure risk. There's no option, there's no hope of having any positive results. Okay, so we are going to discuss that step by step. So I want to make sure I'm just trying to introduce you to risk. I don't want to rush it. Now, the risk oversight process begins with what? With the board of directors, with the board. How are we going to process the risk? What are the risks that we are exposed to? The board have to cover and assess all this. Then number 2 is management has the responsibility for developing and implementing the company's strategy and routine. That is the operational risk management system within the strategy set by the board and subject to board oversight. What we are saying here is that it is the responsibility of the management to implement the type of control they are going to employ, the type of management they are going to, the type of strategies they are going to use in order to limit, to reduce the risk. Okay, in order to control the risk and in order to manage the risk. Now, shareholders have responsibility for assessing the effectiveness of the board in overseeing the risk. Now that you have already assessed the risk and then implementing the process you are going to use, what next do you have to do? Are you supposed to go and sit down and start sleeping? No, you must monitor the risk. You must make sure you are assessing the risk. You must make sure you are evaluating the risk. You are make sure that you are following. Make sure that the implementation is well followed. Now, risk management and internal control. I'm going to actually use 2 materials for you. I'm actually using this one as a summary. Then once you are done with this, I'm going to go to the other materials, which is going to involve the in-depth of what we actually want to discuss in a full length. But this one is just for us just to look at it, discuss before we actually move on with that. Now, let's continue. Now, risk management and internal control. The United Kingdom could state that the board should at least annually conduct a review of the effectiveness of the company risk management and internal control system and should report to shareholders that they have done so. So that is the risk management and internal control. I believe you all know what the form or the coming together of board. Okay, so the board are responsible to review and to give reports to the shareholders. We all know that the shareholders are the owner of the business. Okay, and the board of directors, management are to assess risk and make sure they report back to the to the shareholders, so that the shareholders will know what is going on and if it is safe for them to actually continue with the process, to continue the business and the like. Now, let's move on. This is not where I'm going to, but every aspect is very vital. Element of a risk system. Now, there should be a culture of risk awareness within the company. What we are saying is that what should be the element, what are the system the company should put in place in order to have the adequate management of risk. So the first one is that there should be a culture of risk awareness. Let every stakeholders, let every staff, let every customer, let everyone involved, management, let them be aware of risk they are exposed to. There should be a system and process for identifying, assessing, and measuring risk. That's that system and process should be in place so that if the risk is high, everybody will know. If the risk is low, everybody will know. If you measure the risk and you know that this thing is getting too high to what the company can actually acquire, what the company can actually manage, then everybody must be aware of that. There should be an efficient system of communication, information about risk and risk management to managers and the board of directors. It means there should be communication between the staff, between the management, between the board of directors. If you notice that there is a certain risk in an organization, in a particular section, in a particular development, this should be communicated to who? To the board or the management. Very soon, I'm going to be introducing you to different types of risk we have, and that will open more of your understanding. So, but currently, I'm just trying to introduce you to what we are still discussing. Okay, so let's move on. There should be an efficient system of communication. I think we've just talked about that. Strategies and risks should be monitored to ensure that strategic objectives are being achieved within acceptable level of risk. Every organization have their level, that is their appetite. I don't want to go too fast to where I'm going to cover, but there's something we call appetite in risk management. It means what the company can actually can accommodate. If the risk is more than what they can take, it's going to be a problem. So there's a certain level of risk that every organization can take. And by the time we get there, we are going to discuss that extensively. Now, organizing of risk management. The board of directors of large public companies may be expected to review the risk management system within their company on a regular basis and report to the shareholders that the system remains effectively. Okay, so risk management should therefore happen at both level, at the board level, with the involvement of the independent non-executive director. Who are the independent or who are the non-executive directors? Non-executive directors are also part of the what? Of the directors. The directors should be divided into two. We have executive directors and non-executive directors. Non-executive directors are not into running of the organization, day-to-day runnings, and they are not collecting remuneration. Okay, they are those parts of the board to make the board balance in terms of decision making. And in this time, so they should be involved in risk management and at operational level with involvement of senior executives and risk managers. Don't worry, I'm still going to cover all these aspects as we move on. Now, what are the categories of risk? The reason for categorizing risk is to give. Okay, so let's continue from where we stopped. So here we are talking about the category of risk. So the reason for categorizing risk is to give some structure to the risk management process. Now, let's look at this type of risk. First one is market risk. We have credit risk, we have liquidity risk, we have technology risk, we have legal risk, health risk, reputation, business, and there are so many financial risk. And we are going to be discussing this just in a brief. Okay, I'm going to just tell you what are the type of risks you'll be expecting in this type of organization or in this type of category. Let's look at the first one. Let me introduce the reputation first. Now, organization can be maybe Sorry. Okay, now organization may be involved in risk. For example, maybe the company is into manufacturing. Okay, the company is into what? Manufacturing. And in the process, what happened? You will see that maybe they pollute the environment. Once the chemical, maybe they are into chemical, they produce maybe soap and the likes, or they produce rubber, and there's always chemical released into the environment. If that company is not careful and they are not giving back to the environment, that kind of activities will actually affect the what? The reputation of the company. We also have legal, we have credit risk. Let me also explain credit risk. It's something that you can understand on your own if you read it. Now, when we are talking about credit risk, let's assume that the company always sell goods to their customers on a credit on credit. And in first month, they sold like 10,000 goods to customer. In the second month, they sold 20,000 goods on credit. In the third month, they sold 30,000 goods to customer. And you will see that the credit begins to what? To increase bit by bit. This company is getting to exposed, they're getting exposed to what? To credit risk. What happens if their customers are unable to pay back the money they are owing them? It becomes bad debt. And that is why bad debt is part of credit risk that the company must be aware of. So I'll just explain all this one very quickly and we move on. Now, the market risk from the changes is in the market price of key items, such as the price of key commodity. Market price can go up and down. So if you are not aware of that risk, especially currently in Nigeria now that the prices or price of material, price of things just go up every day, and you are still for example, company A is into production of, let's say, cement, okay, and company B has approached company A to supply them cement for 1 year, and the price of cement is 50,000 naira, 5,000 naira per bag, and they agree that you are going to supply 50,000 bag of cement in the whole 1 year, and you give them at the rate of 50, at the rate of 5,000 throughout the year. What will happen at the middle of year when the price of cement actually increased? It means the company is going to be facing what we call what? Risk at the future. Maybe in the next 3 months, that price of cement will not be the same thing again. And that may be pushing them, that risk might be affecting them to get what? Loss. I believe you understand what I'm trying to say. So we have what we call market risk because of the price of commodity going up and down. We also have the credit risk, which I've explained, is the risk of loss from bad debts or delay by customer in the settlement of their debts. Then liquidity risk is the risk that the company will not be able to make payments. That is, they will not be able to settle their what? Their liabilities. Especially maybe a company is into borrowing. Maybe you approach bank and you borrow money from bank, and your agreement is to pay back in the next 2 months. The next 2 years. But because of situation in the country, you make sure you find out that you're unable to meet up with that repayment. So it means the company is facing what? Liquidity risk. they are unable to meet up with their what? With their needs, or to pay their obligation. We also have technology risk. Is the risk that could arise from the changes in technology. For example, now especially during COVID-19, that everything has to change. Everybody has to go online, and without online, you will not be able to do your business or stuff. So for those who are not well grounded in technology, they will be facing risk of what? Of shutting down. They will be facing risk of what? Of closing down the business and the like. Then we also have what we call legal risk, which involve regulatory risk. Is the risk of loss arising from the failure to comply with laws and what? And regulations. Maybe, especially maybe in tax area, compliance with the filings of tax or taxes, maybe your income tax, your VAT, and so on. But this one is talking about legal. Maybe there's a pronouncement that everyone has to just what? Has to obey. We have health and safety and environment risk. Health and safety are risks of health and safety of employees, customer, and the general public. Environment risk are risk of loss arising in the short term or long term from damage to the what? From the environment, like what I have said. So it's very similar to risk, reputation risk, which is very, very similar in that source. For example, maybe you work in bank and you have uniform. Maybe you work in GT and you always wear your uniform. They have polo, which is a red or stuff. And on your way, you are going to the office in the morning, and you just find out that you started fighting with some people on the road with that branded shirt on you. What do you think you are doing to the organization? It means you are already putting risk of reputation on that organization, because that behavior, that process, that heart is damaged or can damage the brand of the organization. We also have what we call business probate risk, which means honesty and integrity. Business risk is the risk of loss from a failure to act in an honest way. Now, we also have what we call derivative risk, include commodity derivatives and financial derivatives. This is where I can always test if they want to test. And not only this place, everything we have been discussing and everything we are still going to discuss tonight are very, very vital that you have to just pay your attention. This is 20% out of ICANN question. So if you can just sit down, and risk is very simple to pass because it has just only 2 chapters. And there's no how ICANN will test from that 2 chapters. You understand now? So why don't you just sit down and grab your 20 marks from here and move on? It's very simple. So now when we're talking about commodity derivatives, are contract on the price of certain commodities, such as oil, wheat, meat, and coffee. Don't worry, I'm going to explain when we move on. Then we also have financial derivatives, which are constraints on the price of some financial instruments or market rates, such as foreign exchange rates, interest rates, bonds prices, and share prices. So when you look at the commodity, it's talking about goods, it's talking about the commodity, if I'm to use that word, like all wheat. Why, when you're talking about financial, it's talking about the exchange rate, it's talking about rate, price, share price, and so on. When I get there, I'm going to explain more better in that area. Now, we also have nature and importance of business and financial risk. Business risk are strategic risk that threaten the health and survival of a business. Okay, that is business risk. You must be able to identify or differentiate difference between business risk and financial risk. They can ask you in any form. differentiate between risk, business risk and financial risk. So you must make sure that you understand what the business risk is saying and what the financial risk is saying. So I'm going to take that again. Business risks are strategic risks that threaten the health and survival of what? Of a business. Okay? And I think we have discussed all those type of risks recently. Then financial risk is a major cause of business risk. That is, financial risk can also be part of that risk in business risk. That could be risk, that could be cash flow or liquidity problems that we have discussed, can also be very damaging to the financial health of a business. So we have concepts in risk management. What are these concepts in risk management? Exposure to risk. So this video will not be uploaded in any of our YouTube because it's our normal lecture. So it's going to be private on the Google Drive. Okay, so concept in risk management. Exposure to risk. When a company is exposed to risk, this means that it will suffer a loss if there are unfavorable changes in condition in the future or unfavorable event occur. Now, the company is going to expose to risk. You know, you want to go into importing of goods from other countries. And what do? All you have to do is to travel to Dubai or travel to out of the country, go and get all these goods and bring them in. Okay? And then once you bring all these goods in, you are exposed to what? To risk. Because at the custom there, they may not allow you to bring in all these goods. That is one risk. You must be able to analyze all the risk associated with this particular transaction or with this particular business you're about to go into. So if you are bringing it and the custom collects the goods from you, which you have used all your money to buy, that is risk one. Another thing is that exchange rates, because you are going to go there with your money and you are not going to use Naira in that country where you are going to buy all those goods. So when you get there and you pay them, you may not be getting the same value. And because the Naira and the rates now is a bit low to what you are going to get it over there, you are going to be using high value of money in Nigeria to get those goods to Nigeria. And when you get to Nigeria, definitely you also want to get a profit. So you are going to look at it. How much am I going to sell these goods? And by the time I sell these goods, will these people buy if I increase this into? So you are going to analyze all the risk associated with that business you have been into. Then there's something we call residual risk. Residual risk is after you have been able to analyze and see the risk, and you have been able to treat all the risk, though risk cannot be zero. Please bear that in mind. Risk cannot be zero, but you can treat risk to the minimum level. Okay, now the remaining risk you are able to treat is what we call residual risk. Companies control the risk that they face. Control cannot eliminate risk completely. And even after taking suitable control measures to control a risk, there are some remaining risk exposures. That is what we call residual risk. The remaining exposure to a risk after control measures have been taken is called what we call residual risk. Okay? Maybe for you, you notice that if you are bringing those goods from America or from Dubai, custom might try to stop you. But if you can get the approval before you go do this, do that, you have been able to clear that aspect. But looking at the value of the goods and how much you are going to sell, there's likely for you not to get that profit you are expecting and the like. So there's going to be, you can't eliminate risk completely. That is just what I want you to take note of. Then there's something we call risk appetite. Risk appetite is concerned with how much risk management are willing to take. This is aspect I said I'm going to undo. I'm going to explain further when we get there. So risk appetite is what the management are willing to what? To undo. What they can take. Okay? Maybe when you analyze the risk, you notice that the risk involved in this particular business is 70% risk. And management don't always go beyond 50%. That is 50-50. But now the risk is high, it's getting to 70%. So the risk appetite of this company will be 50%. So it means their risk appetite is what the management are willing to what? To take. Then we have risk-based approach. This is often used to describe the risk management process or processes. It is an approach to decision making based on detailed evaluation of risk and exposures, policy guidelines on the level of risk that is acceptable. Don't worry, we are still going to explain more and more on that. Now, identification and assessment and measurement of risk. The first thing, anytime you want to treat risk, the first thing is to identify risk. You must identify, know if the risk is what is present and which is always present. There's no how a business or a contract or whatever will be risk-free. There's always a risk attached to every business. Risk identification is the initial stage in a system of risk management. A company needs to understand what risk it faces, both in its environment and markets and internally. So the market is talking about strategies. Please mute your mic. And the other one is talking about what? It's talking about operational risk. Okay. I believe you can hear me. Okay.
Yes, ladder.
Okay, fine. So please mute your mic. Don't unmute, please, so that we can get the class. Okay. In large company, it might be appropriate to identify risks at different levels in the organization. You know, we have different levels in organization. So the top management has to identify the risk level there. The middle manager or the management, stop unmuting yourself, please. Stop unmuting yourself, or else I will remove you from the class so that you will not disturb us. I have so many things to cover, though it's just two chapters, but the two chapters is very, very wide. Okay. So management have been responsible for identifying strategic risk or business risks for company. Then many large companies set up risk committees to identify risk. When I get there, I'm going to explain that one by one. I'm also going to use Pathfinder our icon path to also point out to some important area that is not in this particular material. Impact of risk on shareholders. So on stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders are those who have interest in the organization. So what could be the impact of risk on all these stakeholders? The first stakeholders is employees, that is the staff. So employees are exposed to several risks in their job. So if management take wrong decision and the risk is coming out to have high impact on the organization, it's going to affect the staff or the employees. So it might be risk of losing their job or threats to health and safety in the work in which they work. Then investors, which means the company will not be able to pay the return to investors, those who invest in the organization. The purpose of investing is to get return. But in a case where company is unable to have return, then they will start having problems. And then the investor will start having that risk of losing their investment. Okay? So we also have the creditors also may be facing risk of unable to pay them because you have borrowed or you have you bought materials from them on credit. And if the company is into trouble, they will not be able to get to recover their money too. So it becomes bad debt to them. So they are also facing what we call risk, and the risk is also going to have impact on them as well. We have community and the general public. So community and general public, they are just like ordinary you and myself. Okay, which we are making use of their information or our community. So this is our community. So if they are having problem, we know that many staff are going to be sacked. And if they sack their staff, what will happen to the environment? Then we are going to have more thieves, robbers in the streets. And what is going to happen? Many husbands will go hunger. They will not be able to take care of the family. And these are the risks they are going to be facing. Then the government also. A risk for government is that major companies will decide to invest in a different country. There's some time that different companies have to leave Nigeria and move to Ghana and go to other country where they will be able to what? To get higher return, where they are going to pay lesser what? Taxes. And customer as well. Product safety risk for a company are also a risk for customer who use them. Now we have assessing risk. How do we assess risk? The first one we are talking about is what? Is risk identification. Don't forget. After you have been able to identify the risk, the next thing is to assess the risk. Then you are going to now look at impact and probability of occurring. We have been able to identify risk, that these are the things that is going to happen. These are the things and things that are going to happen. Then we are now going to look at it. What is the probability of happening? And what is the impact? What damage is it going to bring to the organization as a whole? So the assessment of risk is sometimes called risk profiling or risk mapping. Don't forget, a simple approach to risk mapping involves taking each risk that has been identified and placing it on a what? On a map. So we have high impact, we have low impact, we also have high impact or low probability, we have high impact and low probability. Because this place is high, so in this place is what we call high impact and low probability. Then in this side, in this other side is what we call high impact and high probability. I believe we are trying to judge something as well as we move on. Okay. So under this high impact and low probability, consider the needs to control measures such as insurance and then damage, that is damage to assets. What we're saying is that if this risk, if this happen, okay, it's going to have high impact. It's going to damage a lot of things, but the probability of happening is very, very low. That is what that aspect is saying. While the second part is saying high impact and high probability. It means this thing, if it happens, is going to have damage. The damage is going to be very high on the organization. And the probability of happening is very, very what? Is very, very high as well. Then when you look at the low impact and low probability, this means that if this thing happens, it won't have much impact on the organization. And the chances of happening is very, very what? Is very, very low. Is very, very minimal. Okay? Then another thing is that low impact, low probability. That is, the impact is low, and then the probability is also what? Is also low. So what is this one saying is that review, as long as you cannot completely eliminate the risk, all you just have to do is to review it periodically and make sure you monitor as time goes on. But under this low impact, low probability, consider the needs for control action. Okay, that is what we call risk mapping, or we can call it impact and probability. Please make sure you understand that aspect. Now, don't forget identification of risk. After the identification, what are you going to do? You assess the risk. After the assessing the risk, you now measuring the risk. Now, whenever possible, okay, I think I have question. Can you just please put your question somewhere? Then we address it later. Okay, ask your question very quickly before I move on.
Yes, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
What we just talked now, is it about ranking risk?
Sorry, what do you say?
What you are just discussing now,
yes.
Is it the same thing about ranking risk?
I can't hear you properly. Can you speak louder?
I said what you just talked about now, is it the same thing about ranking of risk? Ranking of risk.
Financing the goods.
I said what you just talked about now, is it the same thing as ranking of risk?
Honestly, I'm not hearing you clearly. It's not that loud. Maybe you can try to check your mic. I'm not too clear about that. Or you can type it so that I can address it as we move on. You can type it. Okay, I think you've done that. Is it the same thing as ranking of risk? Okay. Not yet. You have not gotten to ranking of risk. So once we get there, I will explain that. Okay. We are going to talk about that very soon. That is even the next one. Okay, now measuring the risk. Whenever possible, risk should be measured. Measuring risk means quantifying the risk. You know, the first thing is that you have identified the risk, that yes, risk is present. The last two is same, low part, low possibility. Okay, so don't worry, I'm going to explain that as well by the time we move on. Now, the first thing we did is to identify the risk. That is for us to know that there is risk. Risk is present in this particular business or in this particular transaction or whatever you want to put it on in this business. The second one is to what? Is to assess the risk, to know what is going to be the impact and what is the chances of happening. That is second one. Now, we are not going to measure the risk. We are going to see if this thing happens, what is going to be the what we are going to quantify it. Are we going to lose 50 million naira? Are we going to lose 100 million naira? So we are going to quantify. That is what the measuring risk is talking about in this aspect. Now, after the measurement, what is the next thing to do? Is now to prioritize. That is what you are talking about. So another name for this now is what we can call the ranking it. So if there are 3 risks involved in a particular business, which one are we supposed to solve first? We may not be able to solve or to attend to the 3 risks at the same time, but at least let's solve 1 and 2. Let's solve 3 and 2. Let's leave number 4. Number 4, if it happens, the impact is very low, and the probability of happening is also very low. So you now look at it, coming back to this place, you now look at it. I think we should treat, if I want to ask question now, out of these 3 or these 4 aspects we have, which one do you think we should treat first? The first one to treat is the one that have high impact and high probability of happening. Yes or no? Then the second one is high impact and low probability of happening. So though the probability of happening is very low, but if it happens, it's going to damage so many things. So if you want to rank it now, you start with the right one, go for this next one, but actually this is not ranking we are talking about, but this is the aspect that is going to help us. These are the fundamental that is going to help us in ranking. This is how we are going to know this one should be ranked first, followed by this, and followed by this. Okay. Now let's go to that prioritizing. Within a system of risk, management companies need to establish a process for deciding which risks are tolerable. That is, which one can we tolerate, and which one we need to attend to it very urgently, and which might need more control measures to reduce the risk. Now, there's something we call risk dashboard. Now, this risk dashboard is into this level. We have red or amber, we have green, amber, and we have normal green. I think I have a question. Low impact and high probability. Okay, that's fine. So it means you are still trying, but we have to treat high impact and high probability first. Okay, then don't worry, there's a question we are going to look at that is going to show us how to actually prioritize all these things. Now let's come back to a risk dashboard. Risk dashboard is talking about that prioritizing, ranking. Okay, when you tag a particular risk with green, it means that particular risk can still be what? Can still be controlled. So it means it has low impact and low probability of happening. Then when it comes to green, amber, then it becomes risks need to be what? To be kept under review. This is the period you are going to be monitoring the risk. And you make sure that the risk does not go beyond that particular level. Okay, the same thing to red, amber. Okay, so at this time you have to be looking at it closely, and you are monitoring it that this risk does not go beyond this one. Okay, now when it is red, it means further risk measure needed to be done. So that is when you are going to start putting so many types of measure, so many types of control to make sure that you reduce that risk to the residual level of your risk. This is what we call risk dashboard. Okay, don't forget we have talked about 2 things now. We've talked about the first one, the probability and frequency risk of materializing, which is what we just discussed now. The second one is risk dashboard, and the third one we are going to talk about now is what we call Alarp. Alarp means as low as reasonable practicable principle. Okay, that is short form of that is full meaning of Alarp. Now this one is divided into this shape. We have the high, we have the low, we have low, and we have high. This aspect is talking about the risk itself, while the other one is talking about the acceptability of the risk. Okay. Now, the Alarp principle is that it is usually impossible, or if it is possible, it is grossly expensive to eliminate all risk, but that any residual risk should be as low as reasonably practicable. What are we saying? What we are saying is that, see, it is not possible to eliminate, to zero the whole risk to zero. But if it is possible, it should be as low as what? As reasonable. Something that is reasonable. If the initial risk is 50%, we should make sure we reduce that risk to as low as reasonable, maybe 5% or 10%. Though it might not be zero, but as reasonable as possible. A risk is said to be to reduce the risk to the minimum level. It's not the time for you to go and sleep. You will still keep your eyes open and make sure you monitor the risk and follow it to make sure that it's not going beyond the normal level you have set. Then, how effective are risk managers? The effectiveness of risk managers depends partly on the role of the risk manager and partly on the support that the risk manager receives from the board and senior management. The role of committee, this is the second part now. Don't forget I said it's divided into three parts. So the first one is manager, the second one is committee. The committee should be responsible for fulfilling the corporate governance obligation of the board, and then to identify and then to monitor specific aspects of risk. Maybe it is operational, strategic risk, financial risk, compliance risk. I still have so many things to explain as we move on, as long as we can cover. Now, the role of auditing. So after you have been able to work with this risk manager and the risk committees, the next one is risk auditing. The purpose of risk monitoring is to ensure that there are processes and procedures for identifying risk and they are effective. Okay, there are internal controls and other risk management process in place for managing the risk. Risk management system appears to be effective. Failures in the control of risk. I think we can read all this one by ourselves. What are the stages in risk audit? Like we said, is to identify. Identification is the first thing. After you have been able to identify, the next thing is to assess, which is the assessment, like I said. Then you review. Once you assess it, it's not the time for you to go and sleep. It's for you to now review. Okay? So the auditor should look at the controls that are in place to manage the risks in the event that adverse outcomes happen. Okay? Then report. The risk should be lead to a report to the board of directors. So the director they have to know what is going on. Okay? And it's only some people don't want to hear negative things. If you tell them that negative thing is going to happen or something like this, they will say, God forbid, God forbid, God forbid. And it's not possible. You can't run away from risk. So the best thing is just to prepare for it, to make sure that you reduce it to the very minimum. Very soon we are going to be looking at how to monitor the risk. Now, embedding risk. Importance of risk awareness throughout an organization. You know, some organizations, they don't want to hear about risk because they are always positive. They don't want to hear about negative thing about at all. So it helps to provide a sound system of risk management. Managers take decisions that expose the entity to risk. You know, because some management, they are selfish and all their purpose or their aim is to get higher return. So they don't mind going or taking higher risk in order to get higher return, forgetting that if the result of that event actually come negative, it's going to affect the whole organization, and every one of them are going to pay for it. Okay, so it is important for all these managers to know that the negative effects of risk can affect the whole organization, and they must be able to match the benefits and the risk together to see which one is going to give us more uh, uh, results. Then we have embedding risk awareness in the culture of organization. The organization should make risk awareness as part of their culture. Okay, I know one of school. Okay, one of school that I know very well. What they normally do is that they always do a fire alarm or something test. They are trying to assess the risk. They are looking at the future. In case this fire break out happens, what should be the way out, especially for these children? So though there's no fire, there's nothing in the organization, they are going to press the alarm for everybody to run out of the building, and everybody should go to a certain place in case. So what they are trying to do is that they are trying to inculcate culture, awareness of that risk into this system, into the students, so that if it happens, it will not be new to them. They will know how to find their way to escape from that particular situation. And that is what we are talking about, the culture. Okay, in your home too, you can also create awareness of this risk. Maybe there's always let's say in your environment there's always robbery or something, or you don't want your children to get to interact with strangers, the person they did not know. What will happen if you are not at home and they are the one alone in the house, and the stranger just come to them and start interacting, and from there they are taken away or they are being kidnapped? So all these risks, you have to train them how to attend to strangers. So if someone is asking them about your mom or your dad and you have not seen them before, you don't even know them, the best thing to do is to answer right from the window or from the door. Don't open the door, don't open the window. What they are trying to say, what they are trying to do at that moment is you are trying to introduce that awareness, the culture into their system, so that if it happens eventually, they will know how to go about it. Embedding risk awareness in system and processes. I think all these things are just almost the same thing like what I've said. Now, what are the roles of risk professionals and the need for embedded risk management? The risk management team of an organization can assist in development of the risk management framework and policy. However, they cannot be only risk managers. The main aim of the management team should be to ensure that the right people are managing the right risk, and that the risk management is always what? Considered. This is where we are going now. We are moving closer to where we are going. Now, what are the methods of controlling risk? There are different ways of controlling risk. The first one is diversification of risk. How do we diversify the risk? For example, your company is into what? Is into selling of raw material, or let's say the company is into selling of clothes, dresses, shoes, and the like. Now, if the company focuses on this alone, the company is facing high risk. Why? Because someone who has not eaten, someone who has not been, who is not satisfied, will not even think about going to that shop to get clothes, to get shoes and the like. Do you understand? So that company is facing risk in case the customer fails to come and they are not buying anything from you again. And from there, the person will just pass. So what happened at that point is to diversify. You have 20 million naira to start business. Why don't you put 10 million naira in that clothing and stuff? Then the remaining 10 million naira, think of something else. Put that 10 million naira in another place, into another business entirely. Maybe food, maybe building, maybe institution, and the like. There are so many things you can put your money into for you to know that if one did not work, the other one will work. So you are not putting all your eggs in one basket. That is what we mean by saying diversification. Okay. The next one is risk transfer. You can actually transfer risk. If you notice that this risk is very high and the return is very high, and you don't want to run away from this business, all you can do is simple, is just to transfer the risk to third party. How do you transfer risk to third party? That is insurance. For example, maybe you are the kind of, your own company is to buy goods from abroad, from Dubai. And when you buy from Dubai, what do? You have to pass through, let's say, sea. Your goods will pass through sea. And what happens if this ship is sink? It means your whole 20 million naira is gone straight away. So what do? You will insure that goods. So even if that's the whole 20 million naira sink on the sea, you will still get something from the third party, which is insurance. Although it's going to be 50-50. What happens if the good does not sink on the way? Then you get your good back. And what happens if the goods, the whole thing sink on the sea? Then the insurance will pay you back. That is what we call transfer. You have transferred the risk to the third party. Then we have risk sharing. You can actually share the risk with third person. You can share the risk with bank. Or let's say, okay, you have a particular business you want to go into, and this particular business will require 20 million naira, and you don't want to put your whole 20 million naira in this business. You have a friend that also have, or that is also interested in doing this business. You just call the person, see, I have this business, let's start this business together. You bring 10 million naira, I will bring 10 million naira, and we put it in the business. So if the 20 million naira is lost, sink, it means I'm not losing the 20 million I have with me. We are both losing 10 million naira. So from there, you have been able to share the risk involved in that business. Then we also have hedging. The hedging, I'm going to explain it when we get to that material as well. So what do we mean by risk hedging? It's like, fine, you want to buy a particular product in abroad, but due to the risk and the interest rate that the dollar is just going up, but you are not ready to buy that goods now. I believe you can hear me. Can we hear me? Okay, fine. You can hear me.
Yes, sir.
All right, fine.
Loud and clear.
All right, thank you so much. So now you want to buy a particular product from America or from Dubai, and you are going to need that product. You are going to buy this product in the next 3 months. Okay, and you have budgeted to buy this particular product for 10 million naira. But as a result of this dollar rates and stuff, you may not be able to get that particular product in the next 3 months for that 10 million naira. So what can you do? You can actually apply this. What are you going to do? You just approach bank and say, see, there's a particular product I want to buy in the next 3 months. And it's going to be 10 million naira. Now, this is what we are going to do. I'm going to pay you that 10 million naira now to buy that goods for me. If that goods increase more than 10 million naira. Let's assume it's now, the worth of that goods now is now 11 million naira. You will be the one to pay the difference. And if that money of buying that product reduced to 9 million naira, my own is that I'll pay you 10 million naira. That 1 million naira difference is your own profit. That means you have been able to hedge in agreement within bank and yourself. So once you pay that 10 million naira, nothing concerns you again. All you are waiting for is your good. So how bank want to do it is now left for them to do it. So is either they pay higher than that 10 million naira or they pay lower than 10 million naira. So as long as they have been able to deliver your goods, no issue with that. So we have been able to discuss about diversification, which is also the same thing as spreading your risk. Don't put all your egg in one basket. I've explained that. I've explained risk transfer, which is example is insurance, insuring your goods. Risk sharing, that is partnership and joint venture. I think I've explained that. Then hedging means creating a position, making a transaction that affects an exposure to another risk. I think I've explained that. Now, there's also what we call risk avoidance and risk retention. Risk avoidance means not having any exposure to risk. It means you are running away from risk. You don't even want to go into risk at all. You don't want to hear anything about risk. That kind of person cannot start business. Even this tutorial center we are starting as well, there's a risk attached to it. You may open the business, you may get all the lecturers ready, and students may not turn up. There's a risk attached to that, and you still have to pay the lecturers. So there's no business in this life that risk is not associated with it. So for you to avoid risk, it's better not to even go to business at all. So a business risk can only be avoided by not investing in the business. While risk retention means accepting the risk in the expectation of making a return when risks are retained. They should be managed. That is, you just accept it. Nothing will happen. I will go into this risk and I will make sure I accept whatever outcome is going to come. You know that it's either you make profit or you make loss. You just have to take that step as a risk person, as a businessman. Now, risk appetite, I think I've explained risk appetite and risk retention. So they want you to know the difference between risk appetite and risk retention. Risk appetite means the amount of risk that an entity is willing to accept by investing in business activities. In other words, to obtain the expected return for business. So they cannot go beyond 50% risk. We cannot go beyond this risk. So that is their risk appetite. Now, there's something we call TARA framework for risk management. This TARA framework is what we call transferring risk, avoiding risk, reducing risk, and accepting risk. It's still what we have been trying to discuss this morning. Transferring risk is talking about transferring risk to insurance, third party, insuring the risk. Then avoiding risk means don't even go into the business at all. Don't even bother to go into business. Don't accept that at all. Then reducing the risk means try, accept the risk and make sure accept the business and make sure you reduce the risk to the residual, to the minimum level of that risk. Then accepting risk means fine. You cannot avoid the risk, then accept it, go into the business and try your luck. Okay, now let's go to enterprise risk management. The board should ensure that there is a robust framework for risk management. A framework for risk management might be applied at 3 levels or 3 stages. Establish the approach